I can see people starting to drift in. We'll give everybody a moment. Okay, good morning, and thank you for joining us today for this final installment of the four-part Beyond Plastic BEDC series. Thank you to Butterfield Bank for sponsoring and BEDC for asking us to do this series. The opportunity to get information out to the public and to small business owners is crucial before this legislation comes into play, which will really change the way businesses operate and how the consumer interacts with those businesses. For those that are interested, there are 3 previous webinars and they are already on the Beyond Plastic YouTube channel. And they will be on our website, which will be launched in the next couple of weeks. The 3 previous webinars have invaluable information on why single-use plastic is an issue, how to give up single-use plastic, and new business models which will help the community move away from single-use plastics. Today's talk is going to look at the next frontier, what we can all do to rethink how we do business in Bermuda, which will reduce waste and move towards a zero-waste community, which will hopefully benefit business. We hope single-use plastic is just the start of the evolution towards a more waste-free model of how we as a country live our lives and do business. First of all, let's do a quick recap of who we are. Beyond Plastic is a campaign that was spearheaded by the Bermuda Environmental Sustainability Task Force and Keep Bermuda Beautiful. And it's supported by a team of about 12 volunteers. The aim of the campaign is to support the government's single-use plastic legislation and to provide community education to help with the transition away from single-use. When we started this, my team members and I, we really realized that there were 4 key areas we needed to focus our efforts on in order to support the community. They're innovation, education, inspiration, and legislation. And what we really wanted to do was create a wave of change where all these areas came together to create the community energy needed for behavioral change and a cultural shift. Let's be honest, we love our single-use plastic in Bermuda. You know, in the UK, they stockpile toilet paper, but in Bermuda, we kind of stockpile Ziploc bags and styrofoam. So you might say, why don't we just recycle plastic? But when you look into it, plastic is not a great product to recycle. And in fact, only 2% of plastic waste has ever been recycled, and 7% of plastic has been downcycled. So a lot of the products that you're seeing are a form of downcycling as opposed to recycling. And whenever you do downcycling, it's not one for one. So it's not a solution, especially as overall, plastic has a huge impact on human health and fertility, and that needs to be taken into consideration. Plastic also leaches harmful chemicals into our oceans, which has an impact on the health of our oceans and ultimately the whole planet. And did you know, this was a statistic that I found, do you know 8 million metric tons of plastic enter the ocean every year? Certainly, when I was doing my KBB role, is that we saw all of these pieces washing up on our shorelines all over Bermuda. And when you do that, when you do a beach cleanup, you really realize that there's a problem and that needs to be addressed. So, you know, the thing about plastic is it's made from chemicals and that contain planet warming fuels such as gas, oil, and even coal. And this whole pipeline of plastic production from the start of, you know, fracking and things like that, all the way to the plastic water bottle that you're drinking out, it contributes to climate change. And so ideally, what we really want to do is turn that pipeline off. And by choosing single-use plastics, which is 50% of all plastics made, you can help turn that pipeline off. So this is why businesses need to look at how to replace, reuse, and refuse plastic. This might seem like it's going to cost business money, and it might be that there's some initial costs, but over time, if a restaurant or a coffee shop looks to adopt a reuse and a refuse model, it should actually cost them less money and ultimately reduce waste. If you're going to replace, that's a different model, and that may cost you a bit more money in the short term, because certainly the green products at the moment, there is a differential between single-use plastic and single-use made out of other materials. We're hoping that that changes, and we're hoping that the government puts in duty, sort of changes the duty so that green items have less duty on them than single-use plastic items. Certainly, when we're thinking about all of this, we need to think of all the costs of single-use plastic. There's the trash costs, the litter costs, the healthcare costs, the environmental costs, and the climate change costs. And nowhere else where you really see this is Bermuda, because, you know, it is a small island, but our litter goes straight into the ocean. Climate change is going to see parts of the island underwater, you know, so we really, really have to think about this. And the other thing to think about is the healthcare costs. In Bermuda, healthcare is incredibly expensive. We all know this, and we have certain diseases that are connected to the chemicals and things that you find in plastic. So there are costs also to plastic, which people don't really consider when they're looking at the cost of plastic, and that's the extraction, the refinement, production, and disposal of plastic. And this all needs to be considered. And so actually the true cost of plastic is 10 times the initial cost of plastic. So when you're thinking of that as a product lifespan, it's not really the cheaper option. And it's definitely time to rethink and figure out the best way forward, which is not just planet friendly, but is also human and business friendly. So waste has been on the increase for years, and it is time for all of us to fight back. We're all responsible, and as individuals and businesses, we all fill up our trash bags, put them out, and do not give another thought, unless of course they are not picked up or the cats get to them. When I was a child, everything went to the dump, and now we have the incinerator. This sort of feels like the problem is solved. And certainly it is solved from an individual's perspective or a business's perspective, and then it's no longer our responsibility, it's government's. So let's kind of think of that through waste in Bermuda. There's a lot to consider. You know, to get a truck to take a load of trash to the dump is over $100 now. And that is a cost that people don't really consider when they're looking at the cost of single-use plastic. And so if you're using a reuse scheme, you're not going to be paying that $100 towards that truckload of trash. So the cost, and there's also the cost to consider to the taxpayer of the aging incinerator. We've all heard about the millions that it costs us to repair it, but also to run it every year. It does produce energy, you know, that is the one upsides of the incinerator. But there is pollution. I know it's within the normal bands and it's carefully regulated, but it's definitely something that needs to be considered. Certainly less waste would reduce the cost of the facility, and we really need to start planning now for what the model of the future is. We already know that the incinerator has kind of almost reached its lifespan. And so what is the way to go forward? What is the most planet-friendly way to go? What can we do in Bermuda with our waste? And I think that whole model needs to be rethought. So let's sort of think through waste in Bermuda. So in Bermuda, our trash is picked up once a week and taken to the incinerator. Some of our waste is shipped to the US for processing and disposal in US EPA environmentally regulated landfill facilities and recycling facilities. You know, cans and things are sent to the States to be recycled. Recycled glass is actually ground down and reused in Bermuda, which is a great reuse model. Then there's waste that is thrown overboard or is littered on our beautiful island. There are abandoned boats, which people don't really think of as a type of litter, but they are. And those need to be considered. And, you know, there needs to be a system where we relook at these large types of litter. So in 2019, the amount of waste generated in Bermuda was about 87,000 metric tons. 400 metric tons was recycled, 11,000 metric tons was composted, and 65,000 metric tons was incinerated. That is the biggest proportion of the waste went to the incinerator. And it seems like that's a really efficient system, but it's not really that efficient when you take everything into consideration. So, and household waste was actually, I was surprised about this, was the smaller amount of it. Household waste is about 29 metric tons, and all the other waste was 57 metric tons. So you're really looking at a lot of waste that's coming from our businesses and from other streams. So it's not just about households. And the other interesting statistic that came out in the government's environmental compendium was that of the waste collected, about 27% was paper products and 24% was organic material. This means that there is a chance that over 50% of our waste could be reduced if we embraced a composting solution. And that would be a huge reduction in cost to the incinerator, which obviously then means that the taxpayer isn't having to pay that money for the incinerator. So what could we do in a perfect world? Well, you know, is businesses, individuals, it would be great if they could eliminate unnecessary waste, sorting their waste at source, reducing waste, separating out liquids. I know that a lot of people put, if milk goes off, it goes into the trash bag. If you just poured that milk away, that would reduce the amount of waste that is going to the incinerator. Compacting waste is another kind of a tool that we need to use more in Bermuda. So let's talk through sorting at source. So this really reduces the cost of waste disposable for everyone. So a lot of people, when they travel, they'll know that when you are in other countries, you have to separate the cardboard and the paper from the cans, from the glass, from the plastic. And there's a reason for that, because it is very hard to sort waste once it is in the system. So if you throw everything into a trash bag, and it's combined, especially with food waste, it's much harder to sort. And certainly our government at the moment doesn't have the ability to make the waste management system more costly or more laborious on their end. And the other thing that you always have to consider in Bermuda is mechanization. So we all know is one of the downsides is our salty and humid environment. So that does need to be considered, but certainly sorting at source has less impact on the environment. And this is the dominant model which is being embraced in the US and the UK when people are looking at their waste management. And there would have to be an investment by government to kind of bring this about, but it's whether that long-term goal is worth that investment, and whether actually it's cheaper than trying to get the incinerator or even building a new incinerator. So then the other thing that we do in Bermuda is obviously recycling. We have a pretty good recycling model, and when you take into account Bermudians' love of house sales and selling on Facebook, a lot is already being recycled in Bermuda. Certainly my house in Bermuda is full of things that I bought off Facebook or found in a charity shop. And but there's a lot more that we can be doing. And what I don't think that people realize is that most restaurants on the island are not recycling. And this is such an easy thing to do, is to have restaurants recycle. And those cans and those glass bottles, well, the glass will be used for projects in Bermuda, but the cans are actually sold for money, and that gets fed back into the system. And so whenever you put a can or a glass bottle in a normal trash bag and send it to the incinerator, you're basically wasting money, if that makes any sense. So I think it probably is going to be necessary to have making recycling mandatory, and that will probably have to happen through some sort of legislation. And the way we collect recyclables probably needs to be examined, and whether we can move to a bagless system. You know, one of the things when you're looking at waste management, how you can move the system away from bags is a good thing. Certainly, if you take food waste out, a lot of trash is actually dry, and so you could have everything just go in a big trash can, and you wouldn't need a bag. And maybe what should happen is that there should be incentive schemes for businesses as opposed to punitive models. I think that's the thing that we at Beyond Plastic are very keen about, is about collaboration and about incentives as opposed to having punitive models of trying to make people do things. While the government says all of its departments should recycle, at the moment, anecdotally, we know that they do not. And certainly in our public parks, it would be great if that waste was recycled. So composting, I'm a big fan of composting. I think that it would make such a difference in Bermuda and reduce our waste and have the added benefit of providing us with soil that could be used in our fields and in our gardens, which would mean that we didn't have to import foreign soil, which we all know has its problems. Certainly diseases and things like that have come in soil in the past. So if we could generate our own soil, there would no doubt that would benefit the whole kind of the agricultural industry in Bermuda and the garden industry in Bermuda, and that would have knock-on effects. People are definitely starting to compost in their backyards again. It's not, when I was a kid at my grandparents', like everything was composted, but you are starting to see that return. And certainly Marsh Folly accepts horticultural waste. But what would be ideal is if they accepted food waste. And this could then naturally compost and give the necessary nutrients that right now our compost at Marsh Folly doesn't have, because it is only horticultural waste. So it's missing some of the nutrients and the nitrogen that you get from food waste. And it would definitely be also interesting to look at the feasibility of having a shredder for paper and cardboard so that it could be composted, because we all know that we are importing more and more things from Amazon and through all of our courier services. And I don't think that's going to stop, and I don't think it necessarily has to. But when you see the amount of cardboard that comes out of that, it would be great if we could actually compost that and turn it into a zero waste system. So I can hear you all saying, but what about the rats? Whenever I bring this subject up, everyone goes, no, we can't do it. The rats. Well, the thing is we have a rat problem in Bermuda. Actually, turning Marsh Folly into a big composting facility would not mean that we have more rats necessarily, because we already do have rats. But there are things you can do to mitigate rats. So you can do a type of composting called trench composting, where you basically dig a hole, you put the food waste in, and then you bury it. And then, obviously turning regularly and making sure there's enough moisture in the soil is a big part of it. And apparently randomly, rats don't like mint. So if you surround your composting, wherever you're composting, with tons of mint, apparently that keeps them away. It's definitely worth trying. I'm thinking of going out and buying some mint to see if it works, because I definitely have rats at home. But I think that's because I'm opposite Darrell's Wharf. So that just all needs careful thought, but it's definitely something that we should be having conversations about. So we've touched several times on reusables, which no doubt offer the best model. We really looked at this in some of our earlier webinars. It'd be nice to see encouragement for small businesses to invest in reusable products. And by this, I mean like reusable food containers and things like that. And whether this is through a government incentive scheme or through environmental business loans, is if we could actually help small businesses kind of invest in these reusable schemes and kind of foster these business models, I think it would be really helpful. And I think that what you would find is if you gave that investment, that those small businesses would flourish because their costs would be reduced because they're no longer paying for the single-use plastic that all the food and drinks go out the door in. The government should also probably consider extended producer responsibility and deposit return systems. When I was a kid, I remember picking bottles out of the bushes at Church Bay in order that they would be returned and you could get some money from them. It would be really interesting to look at that, because that would definitely help some of our smaller businesses if we had a standard bottle that could be washed and reused. And this would really help shift the paradigm in Bermuda towards a more zero waste model. Now, where are we? So there are opportunities for businesses to be part of the change needed in waste management. Importing bins that, it would be great if we had a standard bins across the island, and trash trucks that could pick up the bins. As you see in the Corporation of Hamilton, their bins and trash trucks are pretty awesome, and so the guys don't actually have to lift the bins. The truck actually lifts the bins and puts the trash in. And I'm not sure what they do with the recycling, but I'm going to investigate that. But yes, we definitely need to look at that model and see where the investment is needed, and do a cost benefit analysis of it to really see if we can make it all work in a much more efficient way. And better doesn't necessarily have to cost more in the long term. It might cost more in the short term, but in the long term, hopefully we're moving to a model that is more efficient and more cost effective. So let's sort of bring it kind of full circle. The single-use legislation is due to be tabled this year, and there is widespread community support. Whenever we talk to the public, everyone seems to be behind this. So it's really about supporting businesses who to make these changes. So these are kind of all the items. Not all of the items are going to disappear immediately. We do expect that there will be a phased approach and incentives such as duty exemptions for green items. Will it work perfectly immediately? No. Nothing ever does. However, the team at Beyond Plastic really believes in collaboration and that together we can do this. And this is why we really try and partner with the government and with businesses and look to promote them and look where we can help and make this a more fair change and one where everybody has the chance of success. So what can you do? Well, you can get in touch. We are here to help. Whether do you just want to take baby steps or start at the end and work backwards and redo your whole business model, the team at Beyond Plastic are here to help. We've done a lot of research. We've talked to a lot of people. We've talked to a lot of people overseas about what's working and what's not working. And there's a lot of opportunities. The refill model is something that we really have not embraced enough in Bermuda, and we see lots of opportunities there for local businesses, and we really think that the public is ready to kind of adopt these models and embrace these models, especially if there is some kind of incentive. So it's working the business model so that the incentives for the customer actually pay for the changes to the business. And this is what we're really interested in, and we really are here to help. So we really think that together we can move Bermuda beyond plastic, but also towards less waste. And they're kind of one in part of the same. So that's why we decided to end this lecture series on the kind of rethinking about waste, because it's not just as simple as just single-use plastic. And if we can start having the conversations about what waste management looks like in Bermuda, it will help make us make the best choices that we can today. So that's me done. I am now going to open it up to questions and have some of my colleagues from Beyond Plastic join me.
I will come in.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Hang on. Oh, there we go.
Okay, are there questions from the audience?
There must be someone who has some questions.
There's a question here. Are there sources for alternative products in Bermuda today where businesses can source these items or individuals?
Eric, you want to answer the question?
Yeah, well, or Tony's worked with this quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we are a lot of the distributors and the wholesalers are beginning to stock a lot of alternative products. You know, to name names, Mortimer's, Harvey's, you know, and they're increasing their source of alternative products. You know, all the time, they're really making quite a big effort to give the stakeholders a choice about what they can do to replace the plastic. So yes, the answer is yes.
Right, and then it comes down to even simple little things like, I mean, last week we gave a shout out to Craig Smith and about the, and there's other brands of these little laundry pads that come in. So rather than buying a bottle of laundry detergent, you buy just these little sheets. And that cuts down a huge amount of waste. They're amazing, you know, just a simple little item like that. So those types of things. And then a lot of the retail stores now are carrying a lot of alternatives. So whether those be things for food storage or different kinds of bags that you can reuse. So there are a lot of products coming onto the market, and it's definitely a business opportunity there too to supply those. So
if the questioner wants to let us know what sort of products they're looking for, we could probably advise.
Right. One person wanted to know that the our email addresses
is info@beyondplastic.bm.
Okay.
And that's me. So if you email that, you get straight to me, and then I can get you in touch with any of the team.
And maybe we could also address, Katie, do you know what percentage of tag gets recycled? That's tin, aluminum, and glass today, and how much money is generated?
I can't remember the amount of money, but I know that lots of containers go off the island. It's about 20% is recycled.
Right. So if we could increase that. Right. So if we could increase that, that's literally money in the bank that, again,
yes,
that's generated. So
yeah.
So if we could find ways, if we could get businesses to support recycling, that would lessen our tax burden in Bermuda.
And that's the big thing about recycling, is that there's a real opportunity. If you think only 20% of households are recycling, there's 80% more money out there in this, and that doesn't include businesses. And you know, I know from walking around Hamilton, we've all seen the green bins, but there are very few blue bins, and the corporation does supply them. So we already know just by walking around Hamilton that most businesses aren't recycling. They may think they are, but in a large part, your cleaner is putting the blue bag just in the regular trash. So getting businesses to get engaged and really thinking about their recycling and their waste, and actually questioning, is my recycling going in a recycling bin? Is that making it to the right place? Is kind of a bit of the picture as well. But there's no doubt that if we shipped more of our cans to the States, that would be more money in the government coffers, which would lessen our tax burden on waste, because at the moment it's just going to the incinerator and it's getting incinerated. And actually the thing about cans is that they become plaques on the side of the incinerator, and that is part of what wears down the incinerator. So not only are we wasting money by not sending the cans to the States, but we're also wasting money because we now have to get that can off the side of the incinerator.
Okay.
So it looks like mandatory recycling will be inevitable at some stage, just
Yeah,
to give a jump start to the process.
yeah, no, and you know, there's really no reason why we couldn't do mandatory recycling, and I think it really is the way forward, especially because there is a trend to, and it's going to happen even more when you take single-use plastic bottles out, is there's going to be more consumption of glass and cans. You know, bottles are great because they can be ground down, and certainly the backlog of recycled glass was used to do the greens at the new St. Regis golf course and the football field at St. John's. And you think how much we would have paid to bring that aggregate into the island that would have been needed for the golf course and for the football field, and all of the environmental impacts of shipping that aggregate in. And instead, we used ground down recycled glass bottles. And so that is something where that really saved us money and is a perfect circular system.
Okay. Was there, if people wanted to reduce their use of single-use plastics, is there a kind of a top 5 list or things that you'd recommend that people focus on?
Well, I think for me, the number one thing that I think about, other than trying to compost yourself and recycling, is stopping coffee cups, single-use coffee cups. You think every day in Hamilton, how many people go into their favorite coffee shop, and we have great coffee shops in Bermuda, and they walk out with a cup and they drink their coffee, and 12 minutes later it's in the bin. Now, if everybody replaced that with a reusable coffee cup, you think, you know, each person 5 coffee single-use coffee cups a week, times 50 weeks a year, it's a lot of coffee cups. So for me, that would be like one of the top things on our list that would be fairly easy to do, because most people aren't walking far. You know, they're walking to the closest coffee shop to their office. And so that to me seems like a really simple change. The reusable bags, I mean, obviously people are already, we're pretty good about reusable bags. Certainly at the grocery store, we made that change a while ago, but there's definitely more that could be done there. But yeah, Tony, is there anything else that's on your kind of list?
No, I was just going to, perhaps the viewers won't know. I mean, you know, the coffee cups, most people might just think they're paper, but of course they're not. They're lined with plastic, which is the problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as just though it's a paper cup going in the trash, it's plastic, which is going to be there for a long time.
But it's also a way that you could save a business money. If everybody was taking their own coffee cup in,
Yeah.
you then don't have to buy coffee cups. And that is one of the examples for business model change that benefits the business as well as the consumer. And so that's something that we would cite as a very good example of something that could be changed very, very easily in Bermuda.
Yeah, and the other one I would focus on is probably, because I see it all the time, especially health conscious people. They're out running or jogging or walking, and they have a single use water bottle, and here they are, trying to be healthy, but they're dosing themselves with plastic, because the studies have shown that water is the number 1 source of microplastics in our diet, which it's been calculated as much as 5 grams a week. So, using a reusable, obviously, it doesn't have kind of beverages into those reusable, bottles, and they can even be refilled by a business. So it doesn't mean that a business necessarily going to lose out on business of selling, drinks. They could actually refill those bottles with other liquids. So, I would say reusable water bottles would be top of my list probably, just for the health reason.
No, absolutely. And what's crazy in Bermuda is we've made all our children move to reusable water bottles at school, and yet us as adults haven't made that change. And actually it is a fairly easy one. I mean, certainly I've got a great friend who runs marathons, and I mean, she's crazy, let's be honest, but she runs around Bermuda quite regularly, and her group, they leave reusable water bottles behind a tree so that they're there at regular intervals.
Good for them.
And so the fact that they've thought through that just shows that sometimes it's just about a little bit of thought. And you think, you know, how many reusable water bottles are used in Bermuda every day, and that is something that we could really change. And I'm talking about the single-use ones specifically. It'd be great to get rid of, you know, the bigger plastic drink bottles as well. And I think that will happen over time. But you know, really, we're talking about the single-use ones, which are made of a very thin type of plastic, which in the heat, I mean, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where all the plastic leaches into the water. So you're drinking the plastic. And
right.
And so,
unfortunately, people think they're doing a environmental service, which they are in some ways, by reusing those crinkly little water bottles. But right, they toss them in the car. You know, they get left in a hot car, crinkled up, and right, you're just extracting the plastic at an even higher rate then, unfortunately. So,
yeah. And that's when you kind of really kind of can't just look at this as convenience. It's about health, and remembering that that plastic that you're ingesting is leaving you with disease and leaving you and your future children and grandchildren infertile. And so these are the kind of things where we really try and encourage people to think not just about, well, but it's easier for my customer to pick it up. It's actually, you know what, this is a toxic substance that I'm giving to my customer. And actually, if I give them a can of water, that is better for them and is better for the environment. And certainly those products are available in Bermuda. And we've been kind of trying to connect with different suppliers to find out what those sorts of products are, so that, for example, a coffee shop or a restaurant, you know, they all have the drinks fridges, or a gas station, that most products you could actually replace the single-use plastic drink containers with cans and bottles. And you know what, it won't always be perfect every time. You might not be always able to get them, but if you just try and move that way, that then filters up the system and says to the supplier, you know what, my customers want glass, they want cans, they no longer want plastic. And that's how you change the system, is by feeding it up and asking for what you want.
right. We should give a shout out to those businesses that have already, you know, taken their drinks coolers and gotten rid of all the plastic, because that is a growing trend now that we see in those businesses where they have control over their drinks fridges, that they're cleaning out the plastic. And, you know, so thank you and hats off to those businesses that are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new question yet. How will the younger crowd out with friends who want to grab an unplanned latte or smoothie? Yeah, well, that's always a good question. You know, and then the answer might not be is that sometimes you can't. And one of the things that we always close, you know, one of the webinars is that, you know, we don't have to be perfect in this, and God knows it would be, you know, you can't be really. I mean, you can plan as much as you can plan, but for those times where you can't plan and you need a paper cup or a single-use cup, then, you know, that just has to be. But we would encourage the businesses to replace those plastic lined cups with other cups that are not plastic lined, and those are available now. You know, at least on the international market. They haven't filtered into Bermuda yet, but hopefully somebody's going to start bringing them in. So, I mean, we don't need, you know, a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly, as the quote goes. We just need millions of people doing it imperfectly. And that's the mantra.
It's definitely the mantra, and that's the thing is you know what, this, as I said earlier, is, you know what, this isn't going to work perfectly from the offset, but if we all try and do a little bit, that's how we move forward. And I've got 4 kids, and I have hid in the car park of 24-hour Esso because I've forgotten to bring the kids smoothie things and they want a milkshake. So, I'm not perfect, and I don't expect anybody else to be perfect. It happens, but it's a lot of us are driving around in cars, or kids, teens have backpacks, and it's just about not just shoving your reusable water bottle in, but actually putting your reusable coffee cup in, and having it in the office. And it's interesting, the younger generation, some of them are really good and are really environmentally conscious, and certainly are very pro the Beyond Plastic campaign. And so I think they will adapt actually sometimes easier than people like me and older who actually have got used to the convenience and are a bit more set in our ways. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see where the hard bits are in this change, and because I'm not sure it's going to happen always in the places that we expect.
Yeah, that word convenience has come up repeatedly in the last couple of months, especially in these talks and things. So much so that I really want to, the subtitle for these talks really should be "Killed by Convenience," because effectively that's what's happening, not just to us, but the world is being killed by convenience. And when you kind of stop and you look at it, I mean, okay, it's not like being run over by a truck. It's a slow motion event, but it's not good what's happening both to the environment and to ourselves by ingesting, a wide range of chemicals. It's not just plastics, unfortunately. So,
Yeah, and I think I would encourage everybody to start with one thing. And once you get used to one thing, then start with another thing. It's not like this. I mean, some people leave everything to the last minute and try and do it all at once. But I know when you try and give up anything, it's hard if you bite off too much. It's best to start with one thing and go, you know what? I'm gonna get that plastic water bottles out of my life, and I'm gonna have a reusable water bottle. And you know what? If that works, 200 days out of 365, that's 200 water bottles that don't exist, and that is a positive. So it is looking at this as the glass half full, not half empty, and that's really where we want to be as a country together, is trying to make the small changes that will ultimately have a positive impact in the future.
okay. Any more questions from our audience? We may have run out of questions.
I think we have.
We certainly appreciate everyone's attendance on a busy day, especially at lunchtime.
Absolutely. And I really want to thank Butterfield Bank and BEDC for allowing us to do this series of webinars. They are available on our YouTube channel, and they will be available on our website as well. And there is a wealth of information out there. And if you are a small business owner, please do get in touch and tell us about the great things that you are doing, and we will shout out about it. And tell us what you're finding hard, where you don't know how you can do the change, and we'll help, and we'll try and point you in the right direction, and encourage it to be a little bit easier.
Right. Some members of our team are focusing on doing product research. So certainly send us any questions you have. And don't forget that our email address again is info@beyondplastic.bm. The web page is not 100% up. We just have a placeholder there right now, but in the next week or two, it'll be there, and we'll have some tips and suggestions and research information, and that will become a good source of information going forward.
Yep.
So,
and we also have our Facebook page and our Instagram posts as well.
right.
So you can always go to KBB and BEST, because they'll point you straight to us as well. You know, this is an amazing collaboration, this campaign, between the two organizations, and so it has been a very positive way to approach this issue, which is going to change the way we do business. There's no doubt about it, but hopefully it will be for the better.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Good.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Tony.
Okay.
And everybody have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Good night. Bye.